Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Malhoit, the Director of Product Marketing for IP Fabric. Today, I want to talk about a question we've probably all asked ourselves, maybe several times, which is why is it that IT projects, no matter how carefully planned, always seem to run over budget and behind schedule? Now, I think the answer lies in something that's both fundamental and deeply misunderstood. It's the unknown unknowns, right? We talk about complexity all the time in IT, but it's not just about the complexity that we can see, that we know about. It's the hidden interdependencies, the forgotten risks, and the technical debt that truly does compound over time. So, today we're going to explore how these invisible forces create what feels like chaos, which may actually be chaos, and how you can actually bring clarity to complexity so that you can make more informed decisions without slowing down your innovation. So, first, I want to start with a familiar story of IT project overrun costs and delays. Now, we all have these stories. I certainly had them in my time as a network engineer and definitely as a consultant. It's nothing to be ashamed of. We have to talk about these things, right? We first heard this particular story while sitting on a Zoom call listening to a new prospect. And one of the questions we always ask new folks that we're working with is tell us about a time that you or your teams had to come in for an unplanned outage. And wow, were they just able to jump right in with this answer, right? They called the project they were talking about building the sites of the future. So basically, they were building new data centers, modernizing the connectivity in the LAN and the WAN, building in automation for configuration and troubleshooting and those kinds of things. And when we joined them, they were already 18 months past their target dates. And they had actually made it as far as turning on their first site when the alarm bells just started going off. It turns out that they were using the same networks as another site which already existed in South Africa. Now, it may seem like this should have been caught, but we're talking about a hyperscaler here, right? With thousands and thousands of networks and maybe even thousands of people actually managing those networks. And by the way, isn't it funny how we refer to networks in the plural, but it really is just all one network, which is, of course, why it's a problem that you can't be reusing subnets and IP addresses and things. At any rate, it was a giant network with a lot of hidden complexity, so they didn't catch it until they went into production. Now, this is just one example, but this is applicable to everything, every IT project, right? As I like to say, every IT project is essentially a migration with interdependencies. Do you have a new AI or automation initiative coming, a data center networking refresh, or a cloud migration, even a repatriation coming? I'm willing to bet everyone who's listening to this has some big project plan for this year, or maybe something that slipped from last year. And this slide represents a familiar horror story, probably, that you're either in the middle of or you're desperately trying to avoid. Now, the reason I said I'm willing to bet all of you have these upcoming projects is because we at IP Fabric did some of our own research this last year, and we found a pattern when we're talking to all of these people. We spoke to several technology leaders, and everyone in these technology leadership positions. They tend to think in three different horizons when doing their yearly planning. Now, that first horizon is the near term or the daily things that just have to get done. And by the way, these are the things that are bogging IT down, the things that IT really doesn't want to spend their time doing, but also the things that they just have to do. Then there's the medium term. Now, these are the things that are often more cross functional. Projects which are budgeted and planned. These are the projects IT actually wants to be working on, the exciting projects that often they fall behind on because of the daily activities that are bogging them down and also the complexity of cross-functional projects. This is the project that we're talking about in that last slide, right? The story of building the sites of the future. Lastly, leaders are thinking about the long term, or how I like to phrase it, what the technology organization needs to do in order to be perceived by the business as a catalyst rather than a cost center. Now, this is what's driving that current trend of reorganization to a more distributed technology organization, which is more closely aligned with different parts of the business, right? We keep hearing about this. Not necessarily that the IT stack is becoming decentralized, but the organization itself. Now, if the strategic initiatives are hard to achieve, you can imagine how difficult the long-term business alignment becomes, especially in an even more decentralized IT org. So these three horizons are the balancing act that technology leaders face daily: managing today's fires, tackling tomorrow's priorities, and then building for long-term transformation. But when one thing slips from any of these horizons, everything suffers. Now, I know I'm a vendor and you've heard these pitches before, but I'm also a data person. So I decided to do my own research and I actually found several studies particular to IT project overrun costs and delays. So let me show you what the research says about the real hurdles in those medium and long term horizons. So these figures up here come from extensive research into IT project performance across industries, including data from the Department of Defense, from McKinsey, from a study actually called The Empirical Reality of IT Project Cost Overrun, which actually followed 5,000 real IT projects and then built a simulation based on that data. And their research shows that ignoring low probability yet high impact events leads to risky and often suboptimal decision making. Now, it also says that we, as leaders, don't mean to ignore these high impact events, but it's just that we're often not even aware of the possibility that they might occur. So let's take a look at some of the statistics actually highlighting these issues. Now, 45% of large IT projects exceed their budgets. This is from McKinsey, right? So nearly half of these projects demand more resources than initially planned. Now, at the Department of Defense, only 35% of IT projects stay within budget. Another stat, this is from that study that I talked about, the 5,000 real IT projects, shows that 26.5, over a quarter of IT projects report budget overruns of more than double their planned costs. Now, it's actually 2 to 4 times in that range, right? 2 to 4 times their planned costs. Now, this illustrates the scale of unanticipated expenses that organizations face. And perhaps the most alarming, one project actually recorded a 700% cost overrun, showing just how drastically things can go wrong. These figures aren't just about cost. They expose a deeper issue, a lack of visibility into the risks and technical debt that truly do compound over time, just like real debt. Now, without the means to see and address these hidden vulnerabilities, organizations will remain trapped in cycles of inefficiency, which I actually think is like too soft of a phrasing. It's more like cycles of escalating risk. So the question is, like I said in the beginning, why does this keep happening? Now, the short answer is it's the unpredictable nature of it. We're essentially gambling when we do new IT projects. That last study I mentioned basically found that IT project overruns take the shape of a power law distribution. I'll be honest, I had to look up what that meant, right? But basically, this describes a fat tail situation. It's like comparing everyday traffic jams to citywide gridlock. You might have lots of small slowdowns every day. People are used to this. They know what to do, how to handle it. But occasionally, one breakdown causes such a catastrophic chain reaction that the entire city comes to a halt. And this is what happens in IT projects. Interdependencies in systems mean that one issue can cascade into a much larger problem, leading to those massive overruns. And it's these interdependencies, according to the study, but probably according to, everyone's experience as well, that create such an unpredictable situation. It's what makes these decisions so difficult for decision makers, like all of you probably listening to this, because it's nearly impossible to understand what those chain link reactions are actually going to be, how they might occur, and when is the right time to roll the dice on a new IT project. So what you see here is a snapshot of what I fondly refer to as the ecosystem of constraints facing enterprise IT today. Now, these challenges aren't isolated. They're interconnected because interdependencies aren't limited to the IT equipment, to the network devices alone. And it's all of this coming together that is creating a domino effect that only amplifies complexity with every single decision. So again, why does this keep happening? Well, enterprises are eager to innovate. The business is eager for IT to innovate, right? To implement cutting edge projects like automation, like AI or cloud migrations, anything that you're working on, right? Progress feels though like it's speeding ahead with the handbrake on. Now, why is that? Well, because the state of your foundation and your daily operational demands are what dictate your pace. I want to say that again. It's the state of your foundation that's actually dictating your pace. Now, The network for decades has been a bottleneck. I'm not the first to say it, I won't be the last, but I don't believe it's because of the IT teams, and I don't believe that it's because the technology is stagnant. It's because the environment in which it operates is inherently fragmented. So think about it. Your teams are managing multi-vendor environments. Even if it's a single vendor environment, it's still totally different technologies in your data center than your campus and your branch. This leads to distributed operations, and it's all happening on mission critical networks where downtime just isn't an option. Your teams are also bridging gaps between legacy and modern architectures while also juggling generational divides. I'm talking about the people here, those skilled in CLI operations versus those focused on APIs and GUIs and maybe desperately trying to avoid the CLI. And all of this is layered onto a foundation that's already strained by technical debt. Gartner reporting that 40% of global IT budgets are now going towards addressing technical debt. Now, the reality is that every attempt to simplify, whether through new systems, solutions, or skills, ends up introducing more variables into an already complex system. Each new tool promises efficiency and velocity, but without visibility and a coordinated strategy, they often just add friction instead of removing it. So the takeaway here is that these challenges are not just a list of isolated issues. They're symptoms of deeper systemic constraints that require a more holistic approach to address. So now the question becomes, how do you bring clarity to this complexity without introducing even more layers of inefficiency? Basically, how do you take off that handbrake? So going back to our original story of the hyperscalers struggling with their sites of the future, they're now one of our customers, by the way. And we deployed our proof of concept, and one of their senior leaders during this time was quoted as saying, I knew we had a technical debt problem, but I never knew it was this size, and I didn't expect IP Fabric to flip over all the stones at one time. Maybe this sounds like we're just adding to the backlog. But again, this is about knowing where those chain link reactions are going to happen so that we can make more informed decisions for our mid and long term IT projects and ultimately reduce risk, reduce costs, and even improve revenues. Now, just quickly, I want to give a summary of what IP Fabric is so you know what this technology is that I'm talking about. So IP Fabric is a virtual appliance that you deploy on your network, which maps and models your entire multi-vendor network, because again, it is just network, whether we're talking about the data center, the campus, the branch, cloud, all of that, right? Some people refer to this as a digital twin of your network. We collect information on state, policies, configuration, and interdependencies, giving your whole team, regardless of skill set or function or even generation, a full picture, normalized view of what you actually have going on right now today in your network. This is not just about what should be going on, but a snapshot in time of what is happening right now today. Now, as we build out this data model, we apply advanced analytics to this data set and then present those back to the user or to the system so that everyone can see current and potential issues, right? So your operations teams can come in and view the dashboard every morning while drinking coffee to see what's happening today. Look at the latest snapshot. How does it compare to yesterday's or the last hour's snapshot? What's the difference? And then taking that a step further, you'll have these time-based snapshots of your entire network so you can do deep root cause analysis of what's happened in the past, but then also prepare and design for the future. Now, everything in IP Fabric's UI is also in the API, and this helps our users expose the appropriate capabilities to the appropriate teams because we don't charge by the seat. We want your entire IT organization to treat this as your Rosetta Stone. Does the compliance auditor need a report? Well, the governance team can push a button to get it on demand. Does the apps team need to understand the interdependencies in order to migrate apps to the cloud and meet their deadlines? Well, they can use a self-service portal. Does the security team need to know if anything is bypassing required firewalls? Well, the chatbot can easily let them know. So the moral of the story is that IP Fabric empowers other teams to self-serve while freeing the network operations teams from answering unnecessary tickets or that familiar back and forth that so often happens in ticketing systems. Maybe most importantly, then, we can plug IP Fabric into all of these other systems that you're already using. Most of these systems depend on having a clean house, right? CMDBs, ITAMs, ITSMs, monitoring, all of that. But they need accurate data to avoid that familiar garbage in and garbage out problem. Now, this is why we're also perfect, by the way, for building network AI models. And we also work at both ends of your automation loops, right? If I can say ends about a loop. But we provide the information which needs to be remediated or needs to be changed, and then we'll check to make sure everything is copacetic after the remediation or after the change, that validation that's so important. Now, all of this comes together to mean better collaboration between your entire IT organization, no matter how decentralized it becomes. And this is what's actually going to accelerate those strategic projects you've budgeted for, or maybe more importantly, the ones which have already stalled, relieving some of your technical debt. So I'll wrap with this slide. IT projects face massive overruns in costs and timelines, right? And much of this stems from the hidden interdependencies within complex systems. These interdependencies create ripple effects. Now, what IP Fabric does is bring these interdependencies, bring these gaps into the light, making them manageable rather than overwhelming, giving your IT teams a roadmap, a steps 1, 2, 3 of where to get started and then how to execute. So I just would like you to consider these outcomes. In 8 out of 10 proof of concept deployments for IP Fabric, we've uncovered unknown devices, gaps that could compromise both security and operational stability, right? If you don't know about the devices, they're not then receiving security policies and compliance policies, configuration policies. We've seen anywhere from 2% to 20% discrepancy between IP Fabric and our prospect CMDBs, right? Meaning that they're either paying more for licensing renewals or they're missing compliance configuration and maybe charged some hefty fines, right? Tasks that took weeks or months, like ticket creation or audit prep, are now completed in a fraction of the time. MTTRs are completed in the fraction of the time. These metrics demonstrate that the complexity and interdependencies within your network don't have to control the pace of your progress. Now, by addressing these challenges head on, IP Fabric empowers organizations to make data-driven decisions, reduce risks, and accelerate those key initiatives. Now, as Julien Manteau from Airbus put it, IP Fabric is a cornerstone of our automation strategy and a must-have for network management. So the question isn't whether you can afford the visibility and control IP Fabric provides. It's whether in this day and age, you can afford to continue without it. Thanks, everyone.